I've cleaned office floors for more than a decade, but nothing in those quiet halls ever looked back at me the way that wallet did. It was just past 2 in the morning, the kind of hour when Kansas City forgets it's alive. The rain outside had stopped, but the streets still glistened, catching the reflections of Henderson Plaza like a mirror that refused to sleep. Inside the building breathed slow elevators, still phones dead, the scent of lemon cleaner drifting in the dark. My mop squeaked across the marble. Steady as a heartbeat, the only sound that reminded me I was still here. My name's Franklin Doyle. 52 widower night janitor. People call me Frank, because that's easier to forget. I've worked these offices long enough to know which desks hide whiskey bottles and which ones hide tears. After my wife Marlene passed from cancer, I took the night shift so I wouldn't have to see the empty chair at our kitchen table. My daughter Lydia is studying to be a nurse. She calls when she can, always asking if I'm eating enough, never asking if I'm okay. That night, I was finishing the executive floor, the kind of place where even the air feels expensive. The city below looked like spilled jewelry. I was sliding the mop beneath a mahogany desk when something caught the light, a dark shape tucked against the baseboard. I reached down and felt soft leather warm from the heat of the floor lamps. A wallet. Heavy. I opened it, and the smell of money hit first sharp, new, almost sweet. Inside were $12,000 in cash, crisp and tight, like they'd come straight from a bank teller's hand. No ID, no credit cards, just a single card tucked behind the bills. A nameless yellowed business card with an address 184 Meadow Creek Road, Cedar Hollow. My pulse stuttered. I hadn't heard that name since 1991. That little Missouri town where I grew up, where I buried more than my childhood. I thought I'd erased it from my life, but here it was printed in fading ink, staring back at me from someone else's wallet. Every part of me wanted to close it, leave it there, pretend it was never found. $12,000 could clear my daughter's hospital balance, fix the roof, give me breathing room for once. But in the silence, I heard my father's voice again, gravelly. And certain Frankie, an honest man, sleeps with both eyes closed. The words landed heavier than the wallet in my hand. My throat felt tight, my palms damp. I wasn't sure if I was holding a blessing, a curse, or both. I slipped it into my jacket, not to keep, but to understand. Something about that address felt personal, like a door I was never meant to open. As I pushed my cart down the empty hallway, the lights hummed overhead. And in that stillness, I could feel it. The night wasn't over yet. It was just starting to remember me. By sunrise, I was still thinking about that wallet. I'd washed my hands 3 times, but the smell of the leather wouldn't leave. It clung to me like something alive. When the clock hit 6, I walked out of Henderson Plaza with the wallet still in my jacket. The sky was pale gray, the kind that makes everything look like a faded photograph. I told myself I'd just drive past the address, see what kind of place it was, maybe drop the wallet in the mailbox, and be done. That's all. No knocking, no talking, just return it and forget. But as the highway signs started showing Cedar Hollow, I realized how long it had been since I'd seen that name on anything other than old letters. 34 years since I left that town, since the night the barn fire took half of what I believed about family. The roads hadn't changed much. The same crooked fence lines, the same smell of cut hay. Even the gas station on the corner still had the same faded Coca-Cola sign. I almost turned around twice. Then I saw it, 184 Meadow Creek Road. The house was still there, but it wasn't the house I remembered. It used to be chipped white paint and squeaky porch steps. Now it was polished, trimmed, almost proud. A brass plate beside the mailbox read, Dr. Edward Doyle, M.D. Doyle. My name. For a long minute, I sat there in my truck engine idling, heart knocking harder than the motor ever did. Maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe some distant cousin. But deep down something old stirred a memory I didn't want to unpack. I got out, boots crunching the gravel, and walked up the path I'd once run down barefoot as a kid. The air smelled like cedar, and something faintly burnt like the past refusing to cool. I knocked. Once. Twice. When the door opened, I thought I was looking into a mirror that had aged faster than I had. The man standing there had my jawline, my nose, even the same faint scar above the right eyebrow. His hair was silver, but his eyes, my eyes, were the same gray-blue I'd seen every morning in the bathroom mirror. He stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Frank," he whispered. "Frank Doyle." I took a step back. "Do I know you?" He gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. "It's me. Raymond." The name hit me like a blow. My brother, my twin, the one everyone said died in the fire. "That's not possible," I said, but my voice didn't sound like mine anymore. Raymond's lips trembled. "It's more possible than you think." Behind him I saw the faint outline of family photos on the wall. None of them included me. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, steady and warm, like nothing had ever happened. For 30 years, I'd mourned a grave that didn't exist. And now here he was, alive, older, standing in our father's old house. The wallet in my pocket suddenly felt heavier, like it had been waiting all along to lead me right here. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The porch light flickered between us, catching the fine lines on his face, the same lines I'd started seeing on mine. Raymond stepped aside and motioned me in his hand, trembling slightly. The air inside was warm, scented with coffee and cedar polish. The walls were lined with photographs, vacations, graduations, Christmas mornings, but none of them had my face, not even one of our father. It was like someone had taken scissors to the family album and cut me clean out. "Sit," Raymond said softly, his voice cracking on the single word. I did more out of habit than comfort. My boots squeaked against the tile, loud in the quiet house. He poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of me. His hand lingered near the handle like he wasn't sure if I'd take it. I stared at him at the faint scar on his chin from when we were boys climbing fences behind Miller's farm. "They told me you died," I said finally. "I saw the fire. I saw the barn collapse." He nodded, staring into his cup. "That's what they wanted you to believe." "Who's they?" Raymond looked up. His eyes were glassy, older, but still familiar. "Dad," he whispered. It was Dad. The room tilted for a second. "My father, Thomas Doyle, the man who wore his badge like armor, who told me truth was the only thing that couldn't burn. He'd built his life on lies I don't understand," I said. Raymond stood moving to the mantel where a single framed photo rested. He handed it to me. It was the 3 of us, me, him, and our father, in his police uniform. Written faintly in our father's handwriting along the bottom. "Protect the truth." After the fire at the warehouse, Raymond said there was an investigation missing evidence, stolen cash, and a suspect who could ruin Dad's career. He was part of the case. He made a mistake, covered it up. When the heat came down, he made sure there'd be no trail back to him. He paused, swallowing hard. I was that trail, Frank. He needed me gone. I could feel my pulse behind my eyes. "He staged your death," Raymond nodded. "He pulled me out before the fire spread. Told me to run, said the papers would say I died. He said it was the only way to protect the family." His voice broke on the word protect. My hands tightened around the photograph. The edges dug into my palms. I thought of the night after the fire, how Dad came home smelling of smoke, his eyes red, his uniform gone. He'd sat me down, handed me a thick envelope, and said, "This is compensation for pain, son. Don't ask who it's from." Back then, I thought he was being kind, taking care of me after losing my brother. Now it felt like hush money for a lie that never stopped burning. Raymond's shoulders slumped. He wasn't saving me, Frank. He was saving himself. The clock on the wall ticked softly, the sound of something patient and cruel. I looked around at the pictures again, smiling strangers' birthdays, new beginnings, and realized how easy it was to rewrite a life when you buried the right people. My father had always told me that honesty keeps you safe. But sitting there staring at the man I thought was dead, I finally understood sometimes honesty doesn't save you. It just leaves you to live with what's left. Raymond sat back in his chair, the coffee between us gone cold. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the windows with a low, hollow sound, like the world was eavesdropping. I didn't know what to say. Every word felt small compared to the size of what he'd just told me. The brother I buried wasn't dead. The father I worshipped wasn't honest. And all those years I'd tried to live up to his name suddenly felt like trying to polish rust. Raymond rubbed his temples. "You deserve to know the rest," he said quietly. "It didn't start with the fire. It started the night my boy died. I hadn't heard that name in decades, Peter. My nephew. The kid with freckles who called me Uncle Frankie and liked to hide my car keys just to see me pretend to get mad." Raymond's voice broke a little when he said it. He was 15. Right place, wrong time. Bank robbery downtown. He was in line with his mom when the shooting started. He paused, eyes unfocused. One of the robbers panicked. Shot fired. Caught Peter in the chest. They never caught the guy. I could almost see the old Raymond. I remembered the one who used to laugh too loud, who built tree houses and burned hamburgers at every barbecue, just crumble in front of me. After that, he said, I stopped showing up for work. Started drinking. Gambling. I borrowed money I couldn't pay back. Some bad people started circling. I thought I could fix it quick, just one inside job at the bank I worked for. Nobody gets hurt. I take what I need, pay it back. I told myself it wasn't stealing, it was survival. He laughed, then soft and bitter. Dad found out. Said I was dragging the Doyle name through the mud. He wasn't wrong. I remembered that time how our father, Thomas Doyle, had walked around the house like a storm cloud. I was 16, still trying to impress him. I never knew the reason for the silence back then, but now it all lined up like dominoes. Raymond's gaze hardened. When the warehouse fire happened, the department was already investigating missing evidence money gone from seized funds. Dad was in charge of that file. I was one of the suspects. If they'd tied it to me, it would have ruined him, ruined the badge he worshipped more than his family. So he made it simple, one dead son, one closed case. He said it like a confession he'd rehearsed for years. He falsified the reports, forged the signature, got one of his men to confirm my death. That man was Detective Glenn Patterson. You remember him? The name hit something deep. Glenn Patterson, the cop who taught me how to bait a fishing hook when I was 8. He used to call my dad the best man he ever knew. Raymond nodded at my silence. Glenn retired a few years ago. Lives up near Lake Shelby. He's the only one who knows the truth. He kept the real report all these years. I looked down at my hands, the same rough, working hands my father had. Why are you telling me this now? Because he said you found the wallet. For a moment, the words didn't make sense. Then I understood this wasn't random. The address, the money, the timing, it was all deliberate. Raymond leaned forward, eyes wet but steady. Dad left that wallet for you, Frank. He knew someday you'd come looking for what he buried. The room went quiet, except for the ticking clock. Somewhere in that silence, I felt the ground shift beneath the years I thought I understood. My father hadn't just hidden a lie. He'd built an entire life around it, and somehow it had been waiting for me to open the door. I drove home that night with the windows down, hoping the cold air would quiet everything spinning inside my head. It didn't. The road back to Kansas City felt longer than it ever had, mile after mile of gray asphalt and heavier thoughts. The wallet sat on the passenger seat, the faint smell of leather mixing with rain and old coffee. I kept glancing at it like it might start talking. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was coming up. Lydia's car was there. She must have stayed over after her shift. Through the kitchen window, I could see her in one of my old flannel shirts, hair tied up, humming softly as she poured coffee. For a second, I just stood there watching her, wondering how I was supposed to tell her that the man I'd spent my life trying to live like the man who taught me right from wrong had lied about everything. Inside the house smelled like toast and warmth, two things I hadn't earned. Lydia smiled when she saw me. "You look tired," she said. "Long night." My voice cracked more than I meant it to. She handed me a mug and nodded toward the table. "You left one of Grandpa's notebooks out last week. I was reading through it." I froze. That old leather-bound notebook had been sitting in a box for years. I'd never had the heart to throw it away. Lydia flipped it open to a page marked with a folded envelope. Her voice softened. "He wrote this in 1992, after the fire." She read aloud, "Forgiveness is heavier than guilt, son. That's why most men choose guilt." The words hit harder than I expected. She looked up at me, eyes kind but searching. Maybe Grandpa wasn't just saving his name Dad. Maybe he was saving his sons. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think there was something noble in what my father did. But all I could see was Raymond's face, older, haunted still, carrying the weight of being erased. Later that afternoon, I drove out to the edge of town where the streets grew quieter and the houses smaller. I stopped in front of Helen Moore's place. She'd lived next door to us when Raymond and I were kids. Her mailbox was still crooked, like always. Helen answered the door with a walker and a smile that hadn't changed. When I told her who I was, her eyes softened. "You've got your father's shoulders," she said. Then her smile faded. "And his burden, maybe." We sat in her living room, surrounded by framed photos and the tick of a wall clock. When I mentioned Raymond, she sighed, looking toward the window. "He came back once," she whispered. "During your father's funeral. Didn't speak to anyone. Just stood by that old oak tree on the hill, hands in his pockets. Stayed there until they lowered the casket, then walked away. I felt the breath leave me." "You're sure it was him?" "I'd know that boy's face anywhere." The picture of it stayed with me, the quiet figure in the distance, watching, waiting for a forgiveness that never came. All those years I thought my brother was gone. But he'd been close enough to see the dirt fall on our father's grave. Close enough to see what guilt had cost us. That night I sat at the kitchen table, long after Lydia went to bed. The house was silent, but it didn't feel empty. My father's words lingered steady and painful. Maybe forgiveness really was heavier than guilt, but if it was, I finally understood why he'd carried it alone. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rain against the window and the kind of quiet that makes you think too much. I sat there at the kitchen table with my father's old notebook still open, that line echoing in my head, "Forgiveness is heavier than guilt." It felt like a truth too big for one man to carry. Maybe that's why he'd tried to bury it. Before noon, I was back on the road to Cedar Hollow. The rain had thinned into a mist that turned the fields silver. I didn't tell Lydia where I was going. I wasn't sure I could explain it yet. On the passenger seat sat a manila folder, thick and worn. I'd gotten it the night before from Detective Glenn Patterson, who still lived out near Lake Shelby. He'd recognized me the second I knocked on his door. Thomas's boy, he'd said, like it was both a greeting and an apology. He'd aged, but his eyes still had that tired sharpness of someone who's seen too much. Glenn had poured us coffee black as the truth he'd been holding. I kept the real report, he told me. Your father asked me to destroy it, but I couldn't. Thought one day it might matter. Now, sitting outside Raymond's house, I realized today was that day. He answered the door slower this time, like he'd been expecting me. I handed him the folder without saying a word. We sat at his dining table, the same one that used to belong to our parents, and I watched his hands tremble as he flipped through the pages. The report told everything the town never knew. The bank robbery that killed Peter wasn't random. It was planned by men inside the department, 2 officers and a banker's son, trying to erase their debts. Our father found out. To protect the badge, he made a deal he'd take the blame for the missing evidence cover for the department and let Raymond disappear as the supposed criminal. When Raymond reached the last page, he just stopped breathing for a moment. Then he whispered, "He took the fall for me. He took it for all of us," I said. He stood, walked to the corner of the room, and knelt in front of an old safe built into the wall. I hadn't noticed it before, same brand Dad used to have in his workshop. Raymond turned the dial with the slow precision of someone handling a memory. When it opened, he pulled out a small metal box, dull with age. "I've been saving this since the day I left," he said, placing it on the table. Inside were neat stacks of bills, banded and yellowed, $250,000, maybe more. Every bonus, every raise, every investment. I was going to give it back to Dad. I never got the chance. He reached deeper and drew out a small envelope, sealed and brittle, written across the front in our father's handwriting, for the one who stayed honest. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was an old photograph, 2 boys standing in the front yard barefoot and grinning, our arms slung around each other's shoulders. On the back, in fading ink, were 7 words. 1 son fell, 1 son stood. Both paid. Raymond looked at me, then tears catching in the corners of his eyes. He forgave me, didn't he? I nodded. A long time ago. He just didn't know how to say it. We sat there in the soft ticking of the clock, the rain easing outside. The money between us meant nothing. The paper in my hand, that photograph, weighed more than all of it. It was proof that our father's lie hadn't come from pride. It had come from love that didn't know where to go. The next morning the rain was gone, leaving the sky pale and clean like it had been washed overnight. Raymond and I sat in silence over coffee, the photograph still lying between us on the table. Neither of us had touched the money. We both knew it wasn't meant to be spent. "I think he's waited long enough," I said, finally. Raymond looked at me, tired but lighter than I'd ever seen him. He nodded once. "Maple Cemetery," he said. He'd like that. We didn't say much on the drive. The road wound through the same fields we'd played in as boys, only now they were smaller, quieter. The truck rattled and the heater groaned, but neither of us minded. It felt right that the journey wasn't smooth. Forgiveness shouldn't be. When we reached the cemetery, the morning sun had started breaking through the clouds, cutting gold through the mist. The air smelled of pine and cold earth. We walked together down the gravel path until we reached our father's grave, a simple stone, clean and unadorned the way he would have wanted. Raymond stopped a few feet away, his steps faltering. Then he dropped to his knees in the wet grass, his hand trembling as he traced our father's name on the stone. For a long time, he didn't speak, When he finally did, it came out as a whisper. "I'm sorry, Dad, for everything I took, for everything I broke." His voice cracked, and I turned away to give him that moment. I took the wallet, the same one that had started all of this, from my coat pocket. I placed it gently at the base of the headstone. The leather was darker now, edges worn from being handled too much. It looked like it belonged there, like it had found its way home. "I think he left it for both of us," I said. Raymond nodded, wiping his eyes. "Then let's leave it with him." We stood there until the wind began to pick up again. It carried the faint scent of cedar, the kind that always clung to Dad's workshop. For a moment I could almost see him there, the way he used to lean against the doorframe, hands crossed, that small, proud smile that never needed words. Behind us, gravel crunched softly. I turned and saw Lydia walking toward us, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. She didn't say how she knew where we were. She just smiled, that calm, steady smile of hers. She knelt between us, placing the flowers on the grave. "For peace," she said quietly. Something settled in my chest, then. Not joy, not sadness, something in between. The kind of stillness that comes when a storm finally runs out of things to destroy. As we turned to leave, I noticed a figure near the oak trees at the edge of the cemetery, Detective Glenn Patterson. He was standing beside his car, a small fire tin at his feet. He held the manila folder, the true report, for a moment, then set it into the flames. The smoke rose slow and gray, curling into the wind until it disappeared. No words were exchanged. No explanations. Just an ending. We drove back in silence. Raymond looked out the window, eyes dry but shining. "Guess there's no winning with lies," he said. I nodded. Only walking away from them. The highway stretched ahead, long and quiet, and for the first time in my life, it felt like we were finally driving home. It's funny how quickly life settles back into its old rhythm even after everything changes. A few months had passed since that morning at Maple Cemetery. Winter was fading, and the nights felt different now, softer somehow. The quiet no longer pressed down on me. It sat beside me like an old friend who finally stopped needing to talk. I still worked the night shift at Henderson Plaza. Same floors, same hum of the lights, same mop creaking through the halls. But there was one small difference. Raymond came with me now. He said he needed to keep his hands busy. Maybe he just didn't want to be alone anymore. We made a strange pair, two gray-haired brothers pushing carts down hallways built for people half our age. He wore his pressed shirts and shiny shoes, at first the kind that didn't fit the job, but after a week he started wearing the same blue work jacket as me. Looked right on him. We didn't talk much at first. Sometimes silence is the only language that feels honest. But over time, the words started to come. He'd tell stories about Dad fixing locks in the cold, about Mom humming while she cooked. I'd tell him about Lydia, how she'd gotten her first job at the hospital, how she still asked about him every Sunday. One night around 2 a.m., Raymond leaned on his mop and said, "You ever think about what Dad would say if he saw us now?" I smiled. He'd probably tell us to quit talking and finish the floor. Raymond laughed, the sound echoing down the empty hall. It had been decades since I'd heard that laugh. It filled something in me that I didn't realize was still empty. We finished late that night, the kind of tired that feels good, the honest kind. The city below was asleep, the windows around us shining with reflections of our two old faces. Raymond wiped his hands on his rag, looked at me and said, "Guess honesty's a hard habit to break." A few weeks later, I was cleaning the 23rd floor alone. Raymond had caught a bad cold and stayed home. I was mopping near the elevators when I saw it again, a wallet lying under a chair. Same black leather, just smaller. My chest tightened before I even picked it up. Inside, there was only a $5 bill and a small photograph of a family, a woman, a man, and 2 kids smiling into the sun. Nothing else. No ID, no address. Just a moment of someone else's life lost in a building that never sleeps. I stood there for a while holding it, thinking about how the last wallet had torn open my whole world. This one, though, it felt light. When I locked up later, I slipped it into my pocket instead of turning it in. I figured I'd ask around the next day, find whoever dropped it. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I looked up at the skyline, same as before, but somehow gentler now. I could almost hear Raymond's voice beside me teasing, "You sure about that, Frankie?" I smiled, tucking the wallet deeper into my jacket. "Yeah," I said softly. "Let's make this one right, Ray." The streetlights flickered, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was cleaning up after the world. I felt like maybe, just maybe, I was helping put it back together, one small, honest act at a time. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me, where in the world are you watching from, and what part of Frank's journey stayed with you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Domestic Tragedy for more true-to-life stories about family forgiveness and the quiet battles we all face.